When we hear the word Spartan today, we instantly think of extreme discipline, minimalism, and just unmatched military dominance, right? But those legendary traits didn't just happen by accident. They were the direct result of the agoge. This was the ultimate state-sponsored system for engineering human endurance. It wasn't just a tough school. It was an intense, lifelong training program designed to completely forge a person's physical and mental fortitude. So in this explainer, we're going to look at the historical sources and unpack exactly how this fascinating and honestly pretty brutal machine actually worked.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap. We'll start with how they designed the perfect warrior, then walk chronologically through a Spartan's life, from the Paiades to the Paidaskoi to the Hibantes, and finally wrap up with the complex legacy they left behind.
All right, part 1, designing the perfect warrior through the systemic erasure of individual identity.
To really understand this, we have to look at the timeline. The agoge, instituted by the semi-mythical Spartan lawgiver Lycurgus, wasn't just about fitness. The word agoge essentially translates to raising, kind of like how you'd raise livestock for a specific purpose. Actually, scratch that. It was a total system of social engineering where the state took priority over the family. You weren't a son first, you were a Spartan first. And the selection process, it began at literally age 0. Right at birth, male infants were rigorously inspected by family elders for physical flaws. If an infant was deemed too weak, they were left out in the country to die. For the ones who survived, they lived with their families, but only until age 7. From there, the state took over completely, locking them into a relentless system that lasted all the way to age 30.
That brings us to part 2, the Paidae stage, spanning ages 7 to 14. This was the brutal beginning.
Imagine being a 7-year-old boy completely severed from your family and thrust into a group called an agela, which translates to a pack or herd. You are immediately in survival mode. The hardships here were incredibly visceral, purposely designed to toughen the boys up. First, their heads were shaved, and they were forced to go barefoot all the time to build agility and just callous their feet. By age 12, their tunics were taken away and they were handed exactly one cloak to wear for the entire year, no matter how freezing the weather got. And sleeping? Yeah, they slept on pallets made from reeds that they had to pull by hand, without knives, straight from the freezing banks of the Eurotas River.
On top of all this physical hardship, the boys were intentionally underfed. Why? To force them to learn how to steal food. There's this famous story from the ancient historian Plutarch that perfectly captures this mindset. He writes about a boy who hid a stolen live fox under his cloak. Rather than being caught by his instructors, the boy literally let the terrified animal tear out his stomach, choosing to die rather than reveal his theft. It sounds insane to us, but to them, they weren't punished for the act of stealing. They were severely flogged for the carelessness of getting caught.
But it wasn't just their bodies being conditioned. Their minds and speech were heavily restricted too. This is where we get laconism, the root of our modern word laconic. Any wasted action or wasted speech was a big no-no. They had to speak in brief, witty, and highly compressed phrases. Interestingly, the philosopher Aristotle noted that a core part of this stage was learning how to expertly poke fun at your peers and, maybe more importantly, learning how to take a joke without losing your temper.
Moving on to part 3, the Paidaski. This covers ages 15 to 19 and is really the teenage transition phase. So as the physical and military training aggressively ramps up around age 12 to 15, their loyalty starts shifting away from their childhood packs and towards adult Spartan society. Boys often entered into institutionalized mentorships with young adult Spartan men. The older mentor was called the Erastes, and the younger student was the Eromenos. These bonds were meant to instruct the youths and forge unbreakable military ties. Now, it is worth noting that historical sources actually disagree on the exact nature of this dynamic. Plutarch describes it as an erotic, long-lasting relationship with an instructive motive. Xenophon, on the other hand, insists that Spartan law strictly prohibited sexual relationships between them, demanding a purely chaste mentorship.
During this same transitional phase, the youths faced some truly brutal initiatory rituals. The most notorious was at the altar of the goddess Artemis Orthia. Boys were tasked with stealing offerings, like cheese, from the altar, all while being defended by older men wielding whips. They were severely lashed in the process. This ritual of extreme pain tolerance actually persisted for centuries. It even became a bizarre tourist attraction during the Roman era, where crowds would flock to Sparta just to watch the bloody spectacle.
Part 4, the Hebemontes, entering the ranks from ages 20 to 29. At age 20, a Spartan youth hit a massive milestone. He graduated to become an Aeron, a commander.
He was now eligible for military service and was given a leadership role within the very system that just raised him. He oversaw the younger 7 to 14-year-old Paides in their packs, he ordered them to fetch wood, steal food, and he was the one dispensing the beatings if they failed. The whole system relied on this self-perpetuating cycle. The abused eventually became the disciplinarians, reinforcing the state's rules through violence.
For the most impressive 20-somethings, there were elite, and sometimes terrifying pathways. The absolute top tier might be selected for the Hippias, a highly esteemed 300-man infantry cohort. Others might be chosen for the Crypteia, which functioned as a sort of secret police. Their chilling mandate was to terrorize and maintain control over the Helots. The Helots were the enslaved population that farmed the land and vastly outnumbered the Spartan citizens. It was a brutal tool of state terror, operated by Sparta's most promising young men.
But wait, there was one final, massive social hurdle to clear. To truly enter Spartan society, a young man had to be elected to a sysis, a common mess hall. And this was incredibly competitive. It required a completely unanimous vote from the existing members. A single no vote meant rejection, and failing to get into any mess hall meant you were excluded from the Spartan citizen body forever. If accepted, they dined there together every single night, eating notoriously plain food like black broth, and navigating to and from the hall in complete darkness to practice their night movement skills.
30. That is the magic number. After 23 years of constant physical hardship, systemic deprivation, and intense social scrutiny, a Spartan man finally graduated the agoge at age 30. He became a full citizen, known as a homoioi, or equal. He was given a plot of land farmed by Helots, and he was finally permitted to marry and start a family. Though, yes, he still had to eat dinner with his mess hall every night.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, the legacy of Sparta and the echoes of the agoge in history. So what did the rest of the world think of all this? Well, even in antiquity, the rest of the Greek world knew exactly what was going on in Sparta. It wasn't a secret. Philosophers like Plato and Aristotle actually praised aspects of the agoge, viewing it as a component of an ideal, disciplined city-state. Later on, the Stoic philosophers adopted the Spartan model of physical deprivation as the perfect way to train the mind to endure hardship. But as we move into the 19th and 20th centuries, this legacy took a much darker turn. The strict militarism was emulated by the Royal Prussian cadets, and in the 1930s, the Nazi regime chillingly weaponized the agoge as an ideological blueprint. They admired its ability to weed out the unfit and forge a unified, eugenically pure warrior class. Which leaves us with a heavy, really complex question to end on. As the modern historian Brett Devereaux provocatively asks, was the agoge truly the ultimate education in physical and moral fortitude? Or, when you strip away the romanticized myth, was it actually just an ancient blueprint for the traumatic indoctrination of child soldiers? It is a fascinating look at how far a society will go to engineer survival and dominance. Take away what you will from these sources, but one thing is absolutely certain. There has never been an educational system quite like it since.